Hello folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And in this episode we're going to spray the frame or the chassis of old Rusty. I've noticed in the previous episode that people were asking to have a bit more explanations on the shot blasting and actually some shots while I'm shot blasting. Well, I'm going to use what we call a helmet, and this is a Nova helmet, and as you can see it has a ear hose to it, so it provides pressure inside, so you don't get any dust inside the helmet. It has a safety visor. In fact, it has 3 layers of that. And then there is a whole bunch of stuff that you put over your shoulders, like so. So basically, you're pretty well protected. The air that comes in is filtered and clean, so it is good to use that, because shot blasting with sand, as we used to do in the old days, is not all that healthy for you. You can develop silicosis, I believe, which is a lung disease. With garnet, I don't know if you're going to have a disease or not with it, but it's better not to. So I'm about to get ready, and then I'll give you a couple of shots on the chassis, and so you can see how I've done it. You can already see in the front here that is already complete. After a while, you will notice that the visor becomes clogged up, and at that time maybe it's time to replace it and clean it with a new one. I have a couple of covers for that, so that's quite easy. You can see that the visor is becoming diffused just because all the grit is hitting the surface. But that's not an issue, because you can replace them very quickly. So I'm going to put a new one in, and then we can start. Here's my ear hose, and now we can actually start. I think this is looking quite all right, and we are now about 6 hours later in terms of shot blasting, and 250 kilograms of this garnet. So now it's just a matter of getting all this garnet out of this tent, and then make the chassis dust free, degrease it, and then we're going to apply an epoxy coat to it. Now I don't want to wait too long, because if you wait too long, you're going to get fly rust on it, and I don't want to get this. So my first job is now getting all this stuff out of the floor. And the first step is to clean off all the dust off the frame. I'm not going to use a very expensive paint gun to paint the epoxy primer, because that is pretty nasty stuff. So a cheap spray gun like this one will just do the job. So the nozzle that I'm going to use is a 1.4. Now I also have a 2.6 nozzle, which is a lot bigger, but that's way too big. So the 1.4 will be just perfect for the paint. I'm going to apply 2 types of paint on the chassis. The first one is what we call an epoxy primer. And an epoxy primer will seal off the metal so it cannot corrode. It will protect the metal very well, but also it has a very good adhesion. The paint that I'm using for that is specifically developed for painting straight onto metal, which has been shot blasted. And the next coat will be black industrial paint, specifically for metal, which I can apply directly onto the epoxy coat. I'm not making a commercial for any kind of paint, but a good quality paint is expensive, and the paint that I will apply runs me about 300 euros. I'm going to apply, as I said before, the 840R, which is the epoxy primer. It's very thick stuff, and you'll see that very soon. You need to dilute it, and then you have to have a hardener inside. So you need those two on top of that, which of course is costing you money. The black paint is slightly different. Here we're having as well a diluter and a hardener, and this is my black paint right here. This is industrial paint. I went for 2 liters, which should be enough. There is always a ratio to mix the paint. So the black paint is a 5-1-1, so 5 parts of paint and 1 part of each. The epoxy primer in this specific case is 3 parts of epoxy, 1 part of dilutant, and then 1 part of hardener. So again, it all depends on your paint, what you're having on your system. Now, I'm also using these little buckets here. They are very, very handy to mix things because there's an indication on it on how much you have to put in. So both is in milliliters and it's both in parts, and you could also do it on a scale if you want for weight. And then finally, before I'm actually going to put the paint in the paint gun, I'm having these filters. I call them coffee filters because they look a bit like it, but that's important that you use this because you don't want to have anything clogging up the nozzle. So with any further ado, let us start mixing the paint. And don't forget the mask and make sure you have the right filters on them. And also, it might be good to have the pre-filters fitted on it, which I will put on right now. All right, so now we are safe. So this is real thick, as you can see. So folks, the entire frame is now been painted with an epoxy primer, and now I'm going to let it dry for a full day, and then tomorrow we'll apply the black paint to it. But I'm quite happy with it, so let me show you a few areas. So I think this looks quite all right. Of course, it is pitted here and there because it's an old frame. It was a bit of a pain in the butt to paint it underneath, but at the end it worked out pretty well. That's one of the outriggers for the cabin, because the cabin will mount straight on top of that. There is a bit of pitting here and there on the frame, but that's where the rust used to be, which we blew off. And I did find a real chassis number 321856, and on both sides we have the Citroen symbol. So I'm very happy about that part. Now it's time for the black paint, and I'm going to use my SATA paint gun for that. I'm just moving over my pressure regulator. And the SATA paint gun that I have here is a 5000, and that is a real good quality paint gun. And having a pressure regulator is very handy, and the good thing is It can even turn, look. The black paint is from Chromax and it's the Imron Fleet line, which is a more industrial type of paint. It's not really car paint as such, but it's high quality. It is a pure type of paint, and I need to mix it in 5 parts of paint, 1 part of activator and 1 part of thinner. My mix is in total 5 parts of paint, thinner and hardener. So that makes 7 parts in total. So if I go for 490 cc, then 1 part equals 70. I need 70, so this is my hardener, so this is my thinner, and then I have 5 times 70, which is 350 cc paint. So that should then add up easily to about 490 cc, which is the size of the cup that I have here. So I can go easily to 490. So I have 2 liters of paint. I think that should be enough. And it's always important to stir it. Keep in mind that there is a limited pot life if you go into paint. Okay, that's 420, and we add now up to 490. Oh shit. You notice that some stuff fell off the can into my paint? Well, it's not a big deal because I will actually use a filter. So as you can see, I'm having my coffee filter again, and I'm just pouring my paint into the bucket or the paint gun, and that should just fit. I started to paint the frame from underneath and from the inside, and I forgot a few little spots, and that's why you saw me just correcting. And then it was time to paint the outside, and I'm using a fairly wide fan on the spray gun, and the fan is nothing more than how wide the paint spreads out. Now in this case I might be losing a little bit of paint, but as the sides of the frame are fairly wide, it was better to use a wider fan so I could cover most of the areas with sufficient overlap. Of course, you're going to lose a little bit of paint like this, but it wasn't too bad. You can see it actually on the floor. There is not that much paint being lost. Now there's a few spots that I have initially missed here on my first run, specifically where the frame goes up, but don't worry about it. I've covered all that later on. I have cleaned all that up and corrected all the different areas, because at the end of the day it has been given 2 to 2.5 full coats of paint, and it took me 3 to 3.5 hours to complete this. This was one hell of a job. How much effort has this been? Well, I spent about 3 hours disassembling the frame, and of course I don't count the time on the video. I then spent about 6 hours shell blasting. I also spent like half an hour steam cleaning it. And then I spent another 3 hours putting the epoxy on, and another 3 hours to put the final paint on. So that is a lot of work, but it's done. Now in terms of cost, this ran me about 500 euros or $500. That is about 350 odd euros for all the paint, and another 100 euros for the blasting media, the garnet, and then another 50 for diesel and some other stuff, cleaning products and so on. So by now, Old Rusty's frame is worth a bit more, right? So I spent 500 on it in total, and probably about 14 hours in total. But now it's ready to receive all the other parts, and that's coming in the next videos. So folks, we have come to the end of this video, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did, although I have to agree I didn't really enjoy all the painting, but I'll see you in my next video.